I know that there are a lot of you that want to help. You want to do something. But bringing a guest just hasn't worked out for you. What I'm going to tell you is the following. God has perfect timing for everything. It's not our timing, it's His. You're not a conduit of inviting people to church. That's the thing that has to be understood. When I say this is something you can do, when I say you're a light can't be hid. You're a conduit. You're not a conduit to say, well, I'm trying to find people to bring to church, but rather you become an open heart for God. And when that does happen, the people that God does put in your pathway, usually that will develop into, that will manifest into, eventually the topic of church does come up. And it's not like you can build a formula and say, well, this is how you do it. So I know it's not easy. But I'm telling you, God said, Bible says, I'll build my church. And the building part is filled with people who have come with good intentions and left. Think of Paul when he says, all Asia's forsaken me, only Luke's with me. The church is built with all kinds of people. People that come for a little while and then they leave. Some people come and you can't bat them away with a stick. And some people, they're not ready to receive. God hasn't opened up their receiver. But you don't stop, you don't lose the mindset that you have a responsibility. And the responsibility doesn't become a grudging one, like, oh, I have to do this thing that I dread. But rather, you're being filled with information about God and His Word. And God's light is in you. By His Spirit, God's light is in you. And all of the Word that's abiding in you, John 15, is in you. So if you look at it that way, the people you encounter, you're not looking at them and saying, oh, that person's going to come to church with me. You're looking at just the way I view people, as most people are lost, most people are very confused, most people do not have direction on what they believe. Most people are following mass multitudes of groups because they feel it's very comforting there. It's comfort to have a large amount of people, whether it's the Roman Catholic Church or whether it's the charismatic Pentecostal megachurches. There's comfort in being with the masses. But fundamentally, once you get into that conversation of asking somebody why they are a Christian, Dr. Scott was right. They cannot really tell you. Think about that. Now think about all the information that you possess, all the teaching that you have been receiving that's denned into you over all these years, and think about people out there that you will encounter. Forget about church for a minute, who don't know what you know. And forgive me for the way this sounds, but you almost have to feel sorry for them that they don't know. They don't know what faith is. They don't know what living the life of faith is. So if you don't know what faith is and how to live by faith, how can you possibly survive as a Christian? And if you don't know what your faith is based upon and what hope we have and what is this hope and the foundation of that hope and the reality, not just I have a feeling, but the knowledge of it. So what I'd say to you is this. I know it's tough, and I know many of you, you're trying and you want to help, and it can become almost discouraging. But don't be discouraged. I think of it this way. I prayed and asked God, after I stopped lamenting about why I was put in this position and how could this happen to me, I prayed and asked God that if He would use me, I would want to be the most malleable clay, and that whatever information, whatever knowledge, whatever illumination He would give me. Because I want to be a good steward, and I want to be a good pastor, and I want to be someone who shows that not only can God's touch change a life, but that same touch has a ripple effect that keeps going. As long as we keep faithing, it keeps going. It doesn't stop. And in my prayers and asking God for help, I remember from the study in the second floor of the house we used to live in, where I would spend most of my time on the floor, on my knees crying, I asked God, I need help. I can't do this by myself. This was like in the first few weeks after Dr. Scott died. I don't know enough. In fact, I don't know anything. Now, for a time, as I prayed and I was reading and I was studying and I books but the mind had not yet really fully been open to the fact that, yes, don't worry, I'm going to speak like God is speaking, although God didn't speak to me. Yes, I know you don't know, but if you open your heart to me, I'll make you to know. I'll help you to understand. I'll guide you. And the same thing is true for you. Those of you who want to help me and you see the struggle and you know the struggle. Now that we've gotten rid of all of the barnacles and all the people who didn't care about God, who didn't care about this ministry, and I'm glad, it's like, okay, that's gone now. This is like a clean slate. The people that are here, they're committed, they're serious, they mean business. That's the best foundation to build on. Now maybe your prayers can be, as I've said, what mine were for me, the same is true for you. God knows our inabilities. God knows that we cannot. That's why everything that I see happening, I say, to God be the glory, because I know I couldn't do it. That same glory will come when you start bringing people, not because you were so eloquent or you have such a charming personality, but because God knows your heart and your desire to help and to fulfill His great commission. And He knows the nature of people, and He knows in what time we live in. And you don't think for a minute that the same prayer or the same type of prayer or the same heart towards God in prayer, that if God would speak, He would be saying to your heart, I know that it's hard, and I know that you don't know exactly, but I'll show you. I'll enable you. And when you begin to believe that, God will. Now, I can't try and encourage you beyond what I've just said. I can only say that this is where, beyond belief, this is where you must pierce through beyond belief and say, this is the purest understanding of putting yourself before God and saying, use me, Lord. Use me to help. And believe me, God hears those prayers. When ego is pushed aside, when the mouth that thinks it's so smart is pushed aside, when the mental logistics is pushed aside and it's all laid bare in front of God, that's when God begins to do mighty things. Now, I learned that the hard way, because I spent at least the first year trying to make my way instead of recognizing, yes, I need to study, yes, I need to read, I need to do all these things, I need to be praying, I need to be fasting, all of those things. But at some point, my faith had to rise to that place where I knew God knew. As silly as that seems, I knew God knew. This is my prayer, and that, in essence, I was reassured by God that He would take care of exactly that which I needed to be able to carry out this task. Now, I'm not going to ask if you think God has honored my prayers, because I don't need to ask you. I know He has. That is true for you as well. So when I say don't get discouraged, it's easy to say, well, well, that's easy. It would be easy for me to say, well, you don't know how tough it is. Do you realize, and I try not to discuss this too much, but unfortunately it always comes back to this because of what I feel it's the scar tissue of this ministry. But to not have enough faith to believe this is God's work, He's going to not only see that it shines like a beacon, but that it's put forth to the world. We lost major broadcast licenses and opportunities, yet God still entered in and made a way. Where the rest of the world said, that's it, the ministry's over. Dr. Scott's last hour on TV, that's it. The ministry kept going. God made a way for the voice and the message to be heard. Now, you can say, well, miracle, but it did take faith on the part of Dr. Scott to face what appeared to be the greatest black mark. You can talk about all the battles, but when you have fought for something so hard and you lose, it's taken from you. That's a black mark inside that's very hard to recover from. This ministry has many of those. Not just the TV licenses. Hope Street's another one of those. Imagine having to come back to you, the congregation, after those events, fighting for something so hard, and it appears it's gone. And we have a whole history of that. And God's history with this ministry is, it's not over. Not, you're all going to go crippled and on crutches and wobble in somewhere. No, the army is going to be regrouped, refortified. It's not over. Now, I could say the same thing of me with the many black marks that have come against me and the things that seemingly, as I tried to hold on in these 9 years, many things were ripped out of my hands. Now, I have come to the place to trust God on all matters concerning His work, this ministry, my calling, the future of this church. I think I'm calling for people tonight to forget about the hundreds of appeals I've made to you to bring people and see what I've said tonight in a different light. Don't say, I can't, or it's hard for me. God already knows that. His specialty is the impossible. That's His specialty. Now, I know we can do this. There's a whole host of enemies out there still. After all this time, they'd be more than happy to see this ministry go away. Or I can tell just the whole listening audience, this ministry is not going anywhere. As long as the ministry, and I'm at the helm, stay focused. And the focus is, this is God's work. And He's not finished with His work. When He's finished with His work, He will come to get His church. He's not finished with His work. So until that time, even when we may get to some of those days where we think, all hope is gone, we've poured out and we've poured out and we've poured out our hearts and we've petitioned God, and whether it be giving or your bodily presence somewhere, but exhausted. It seems like this is an effort in futility. It may be because at that point, we will all come to know whatever is done, God will get the glory. There'll be not one person here to say, I did this thing. God will get the glory. So change your perspective maybe. And if you reflect on what I've said, I'm not telling you to pray as I've prayed, because that's my heart to God, and you have to talk to God on your own. I just know one thing. It's real easy to sit back and do nothing. It's even easier to think someone else will carry the load. But this time, it shouldn't be a load for you. It should be the greatest call and challenge of faith that says, God will. Now, I'm not just going to sit back and do nothing. I'm going to do my part. Having done all, therefore stand. But after having done all, therefore stand, I am going to stand back and watch God do what He has promised to do. Build His church. So, maybe the perspective needs to change. We've got to turn this around. There's lots of sick people that they're sick and they can't be in the church, and I understand that, and we're praying for them. And there's a few people that have moved away. And there's a few people, I'm sure, that just, they're looking for the next best thing or something. So now that we're at this foundation, we need to get serious. As one of those old-timey saints used to say, for some of us, it might be spending a little bit more knee time, not me time, knee time, if you know what I mean. Get on the telephone.
How much you is how